In modern Britain, you can often learn more about what the political class aren't talking about than what they are. You wouldn't know it to watch the news, but rapes in England and Wales have quadrupled in just 10 years. Other European countries, Denmark, Sweden, Germany, have experienced similar explosions since around 2015. But why? What is causing this? What has changed? And why, unlike other European countries, is the British state so unwilling to provide the full data on who is committing these crimes? Bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing. Thus said John Stuart Mill in 1867. I wonder what he would make of today's state complicity in the most horrific of industrialised crimes, the repeated torture and gang rape of tens of thousands of girls across the UK. For there were those that wanted to speak out, to demonstrate, but they were not only silenced, they themselves were often persecuted. The slow drip feed of a perverse new morality into the public domain now essentially regards being a perceived racist as a far worse crime than being a rapist. How did we get here? Remarkably, one of the biggest atrocities to happen in modern Britain, what's known by many as the grooming gang scandal, is only one part of an even bigger problem facing Europe and the Western world. The scales fell from my eyes a long time ago, yet when last year I dared to suggest that the increase in sexual abuse and harassment of women was coming from foreign men, so taboo was the suggestion that the clip went viral. This is such an important issue for me because I've been living in London for 10 years. I've also lived in multiple other countries around the world. Never before have I felt as unsafe as I do now. When I walk down the street, I'm increasingly being leered at. I'm increasingly being followed like I'm going around the souks of Morocco. And it's not, visibly to me anyway, people who were born and bred here. It isn't. When I started working on this documentary a few months ago, I was unable to find any official statistics examining the correlation between country of origin and the perpetrators of sex crimes in the UK. The only evidence was that published on the situation in similar European nations. Yet days before going to edit, something remarkable happened. We finally got data from collated police evidence showing that foreign men, mostly from Albania, Afghanistan, Iraq and Algeria, were over 3 times more likely to be arrested for sex offences than British citizens. I wanted to investigate this fearlessly in a way that would rouse rightful horror in all who should watch and jolt them into realising nothing can excuse neglecting this issue for even a second longer. In 2013, there were over 16,000 incidents of reported rapes in the United Kingdom. By 2022, this increased to over 69,000, less than a decade on, more than a 400% increase. Shocking. We're told it's because women now report rapes more often, a conniving sleight of hand that doesn't bear scrutiny. More reports mean more incidents. If anything, women are increasingly disinclined to engage the authorities. Such is the lack of trust and the normalisation of abusive practices. This harrowing trend echoes throughout Western Europe, from Finland to Denmark, Sweden, Germany and France. But why? Something else has shot up in these nations: mass migration. Now, from my own lived experience, to coin a rather vacuous term beloved by victim game authors, the connection is self-evident. What does data actually illustrate? Let's look to Germany. Shocking figures show that between 2017 and 2021, Afghans and Pakistanis were 16 times more likely to be implicated in rape than German citizens. In Finland, only 3.3 Finnish people per 10,000 were sentenced for sex crimes in 2017, compared to 138 Afghans and 134 Iraqis. And in Sweden, we see a similar story. Between 2013 and 2018, more than half of those convicted of rape or attempted rape were born in a foreign country. In cases where the victim did not know their attacker, the figure rises to 85%. Let's break that down. Algerians were 122 times more likely to commit rape than a native Swede, and Afghans 69 times more likely. Let's look now to France. In 2023, 77% of solved rape cases in Paris were committed by men who did not even hold French passports. While in 2020, 62% of sex assaults on public transport were committed by foreign nationals. In Italy, a similar picture emerges. As a proportion of rape suspects, North Africa and the Middle East are heavily overrepresented. Afghanis and Pakistanis, for instance, are proportionally 15 times more likely to be a suspect than an Italian. Like Britain, Denmark has also experienced a surge in sexual violence from around 2015 onwards, rising from around 2,500 cases in 2012 to almost 10,000 in 2022. Sexual assaults have more than tripled in just 10 years. Conviction rates for violent crimes, the closest data we could find, are dominated by nationals from the same regions, the Middle East and North Africa. So what about back at home in the United Kingdom? According to the first analysis of its kind, recent crime statistics show that in 2024, foreign nationals were 3.5 times more likely to be arrested for sex offences than British citizens. We don't have these kinds of statistics for previous years. The data has either not been gathered or remains unpublished. But similarly, when looking at the prevalence of rape gangs, how many of those perpetrators would be recorded as being British citizens? The true figure is doubtlessly far, far higher. Do you think it's about time that the government does publish that data, or do you think it would be too explosive and lead to a huge kickback against people from those communities who actually are integrated and who actually don't deserve to be targeted?
I think the government should collect and publish the data, absolutely. And, you know, I'm trying to remember whether it's Sweden or Denmark, one of those countries publishes crime data by countries of origin. Germany has got much more comprehensive data than we have. And if you speak to Home Office people here, they'll tell you we largely keep data on ethnicity of victims and not of perpetrators.
Then why don't we have crime data as well, proper crime data, saying like, okay, there's been, let's say, out of 100 sexual assaults in this month, there has been 99 from Pakistan, right? And from this particular region in Pakistan as well, because there are 4 major provinces in Pakistan. The attitudes of people in those provinces are very different as well. And we can multiply that with India, because they are even bigger, Bangladesh, Syria, Iran, whatever, like there, every different area would be different. So if we have a proper crime data to say, okay, like this from maybe, Gujranwal, the people are coming from there and they're committing 99% sexual assaults.
Perhaps now we may start getting better data. Yet even with information being willfully suppressed, crimes that were formerly unheard of in the UK, perhaps indicative of foreign cultures, are now making headlines. The UK now has the highest number of recorded acid attacks in the world, with a 69% rise in the number of acid attacks in 2022 alone. Shocking new figures also reveal that in the past 6 years, police across the UK have investigated at least 175 claims of crimes involving assault and abuse using voodoo dolls and witchcraft. Honour-based abuse, which includes forced marriages, rape, death threats and assault, is also on the rise and increased in England by 60% between 2020 and 2022. Alone. Similarly, female genital mutilation increased by 15% between 2022 and 2023. The NHS first began collecting data for female genital mutilation in 2015, with NHS trusts reporting a total of 37,000 reported cases overall. But it wasn't until February 2024 that Amina Noor became the first person to be convicted of assisting a non-UK person to perform FGM. She took a child to Kenya to undergo the procedure and later told the Old Bailey that the mutilation was done for cultural reasons.
What you see on the news is just not even the tip of the iceberg of how many honor killings there are actually happening. In the UK, you hear a lot, there was the story of Banaz Mahmoud, that poor young woman who went to the police a few times telling them, my father is trying to kill me, my father wants to kill me. And they didn't believe her because it sounds so like the kind of thing a young woman would say when she's exaggerating. Oh, my dad's trying to kill me. But they don't understand that in these societies, that's actually quite normal for her father to try to kill her, because she dared to be too Western, and she took off her hijab and she had a Western boyfriend and she wasn't living the life that they wanted her to live, and she wasn't marrying the man that they wanted her to marry. These are crimes that get women killed all the time, all over the world. And unfortunately, there's such a silence around it because they all support each other. So like in Banaz Mahmoud's case, for example, they weren't going to be getting any answers, even though there were cousins involved, there were uncles involved, her family members were involved, her siblings knew, lots of people knew, but nobody was going to say anything because that silence around it, that these honor violence and honor killings is so much embedded a part of the culture that it is like it has made it upside down, so that the girl who is being too Western, she is bringing shame to the family. So she is the bad one. Whereas her father or her uncle or her cousin or whoever is the criminal, the murderer, he is the good guy. Right? And we see the same things with female genital mutilation, a big problem here in the UK and in America and Canada and everywhere else. If a blonde-haired, blue-eyed father took a razor to his daughter's clitoris, that man would be either in prison or in a psych ward. But when a Somali father does it, or when an Egyptian mother does it, then it's like, well, we'll give them a pamphlet and we'll educate them. You see, and that just empowers them.
In recent years, the UK has had unprecedented levels of legal and illegal immigration, at its peak grossing over 1 million immigrants in just 1 year, largely from non-European countries. Migration has added at least 3.7 million people to the UK population since 2010, with the UK topping the list of OECD nations in terms of new permanent arrivals. More people have arrived in Britain in the past 15 years than the entirety of British history between 1066 and the Second World War. Since 2018, more than 150,000 people have arrived in small boats across the Channel, mostly young men from Muslim countries such as Afghanistan, Syria, Turkey, Iran, and Iraq. Men with very different cultural attitudes towards women than we have in the West. That figure excludes those entering the country illegally by other means.
It shouldn't come as a surprise to us that there are certain groups which are clearly overrepresented. I mean, going back decades, a woman going on holiday to, say, Egypt or Syria, Middle East country, a North African country, you would read the Foreign Office travel advice, and it would say in terms that, you'll have trouble if you walk around alone. So I don't see why conceptually the system still won't really admit that bringing in hundreds of thousands of men from these sort of cultural backgrounds, a large proportion of them are liable to carry on with the same mindset.
So if you look at, for example, Egypt, the country my mother is from, women there, 99.3% of women report being sexually assaulted. 99.3. It's an astounding number. It sounds like hyperbole, but this is a true number, and the research was done by UNICEF. And the reason why you see such astounding numbers is because it's so much a part of the culture. It's so normalized. This idea of gang rapes that we've heard about that were happening in Germany, for example. So when men go around a woman and basically like predators, pouncing on their prey in the middle, which we saw happen in Tahrir Square in Egypt, that's called taharrush. It has a name. It's a part of the culture. It's what men do when they see a woman alone, and when she's not, protected by other men around her, then they consider her to be prey.
It simply cannot be denied that some of the most appalling treatment of women is found in Islamic countries. After all, the brutality of these regimes is often the reason given for asylum claims. In 2024, new laws in Iraq, brought in by Shia Muslim parties, have seen the age of consent for girls lowered to just 9 years old, while women are deprived of the right to divorce, claim custody of their own children, or receive any kind of inheritance. In Afghanistan, women living under the Taliban's rule are not only denied an education, they are brutally banned from speaking or showing their faces in public. Now, while these examples may represent extreme Islamic laws, how far do Muslim beliefs engender sexist and dehumanizing attitudes towards women, particularly non-Muslim women? Talk to me then about what parts of the Quran say about women.
Oh, that's so I mean, basic things, for example, like inheritance. Women would get less inheritance than men. Testimonies in court. A woman's testimony is half of a man's, and you need to bring extra female witnesses just in case one of them forgets. And then you've also got a man's kind of role on how to discipline his wife within a marriage, and that alludes itself to domestic violence, which is actually within the Quran itself, Surah 434, which is a surah of the verse of women, and it tells you exactly how to discipline your wife, and that becomes incredibly problematic because the discipline that's ordained is just merely if you fear disobedience. It's just, a general paranoia that a husband could have, for instance. And then, like I said earlier, the unilateral right of divorce is only available to men. So actually women have no get-out clause. And again, the deficiency in intellect comes down to the Prophet's ruling that a woman's testimony is half of a man's.
So in the Quran, they talk about what your right hand possesses. Malakat aymanukum. And that means that what your right hand possesses are women who are sex slaves, non-Muslim women who were taken as war booty, basically. So that's the kind of thing you would see with Yazidi women in Iraq, with, Israeli women and Hamas, with Hindu women in Pakistan, with Christian women in Nigeria, and here in the UK, you saw that with the gangs, the Rotherham gangs. And it's all coming from that same mindset of non-Muslim women being, just treated with such disdain that they can just be used and abused and thrown away.
When a kid is growing up, in the environment, it's not as if they're taught these things. It's things that they pick up. There are hints within the Quran and stuff of, let's say, of a sex slavery, right? And of seeing not just women, but anyone who's not a Muslim as an other, as sort of like not worthy of, your companionship, sort of a thing. So you're already othering people in that way. So it might not be that they are being taught that you can abuse Western women as such, but I don't think so. Most sensible people, even conservative, go out and teach their kids that. But it's their own attitude towards it that shows the people, shows the kids growing up that it might be acceptable. There might be an incident, like say with the gang rape by the Muslim gangs in the north of England, right? So there might be some conservative Muslim household where even the mother and the father would have said, well, those girls deserved it. Like, look at how they dress, look at how they, they would have done that. So they're not approving directly of the act, but what they're showing is they're worthy of an excuse, that you can give an excuse. So they were asking for it, sort of a thing. So and the people who are eager to explain their negative actions and justify them, they can go further into the Quran itself, where you might say, okay, sex slavery is actually allowed, right? You're allowed to do that in times of war. So they might say to themselves, well, in times of war, but we are in constant war with the West. Because the West is always trying to, bomb our countries or take our advantage or whatever it might be. So in their head, they can justify it. They constantly at war.
Nuria, talk to me about what the Quran says about how a Muslim man may interact with a non-Muslim woman.
Yeah, so effectively there's the verse of women again in the Quran, and that talks about veiling, and it is asked of Muslim believing men to veil their women, and that completely just kind of differentiates Muslim and Muslim women specifically from non-Muslim women, because this hijab or the veiling acts like a marker. And if you go back in Islamic history and you look into the origins of the hijab in itself, it was used to kind of delineate between the two. So essentially everybody who was not veiled or covered in the way that Muslim women would be fair game to be, sexually abused or harassed or have all kinds of sexual violence being perpetrated against them. And Muhammad's companions did this in Islam. You can see it all throughout Islamic sources as well. But it carries over into kind of modern life, and how we saw within the grooming gang scandal and the cover-ups, that those very verses were being utilized by the perpetrators to justify what they were doing. And at times they would be saying horrific things to these, white working class girls about why they were fair game to be treated in this way. And they would actually, say these kind of racist comments towards them or talk to them about being non-believing women, and therefore the violence is kind of justified.
Islamist terror attacks across the West have targeted female pop stars, whose audience is primarily women and girls. The Manchester arena bombing, killing 22 people, was a targeted attack on an Ariana Grande pop concert. This deep misogyny and hatred of white Western women isn't confined to isolated terrorist attacks. The decades-long mass rape and torture of white girls by Pakistani Muslim men is arguably the most extreme example of sex-based hatred and dehumanization to happen to women and girls in modern Britain. At a sexual assault trial of one young Pakistani male, his counsel said he'd been taught that white girls were like a piece of chewing gum on the road.
Part of the problem is a complete lack of integration between the communities, and you have often it's been Pakistani heritage men who have a complete split view between the women in their own community, who are covered up, often kept at home, completely not legitimate for sexual approaches in terms of young men having high libidos. And then they up the road there are, as you say, there's white working class communities with girls perhaps who aren't don't have the resources or the family support behind them that they might, but who've grown up also in a very sexualized online environment. So I think it was Jack Straw, actually, a generation ago, who said some Pakistani heritage men viewed working class white girls as, quote, easy meat.
And I mean, this starts from like the grassroots level of, if you were to be, let's say, in, just privy to, let's say, locker room talk or talk within groups of Muslim young men, you would already see the kind of denigration of white women in their eyes, in terms of, we can mess around and have a good time with all of these women, but then we'll marry a good Muslim wife. And that's kind of the general MO of most young Muslim men. I would say young British Muslim men as well, when they want to have their fun. That's the kind of, like you said, whether it's porn, the result of porn having fetishized them more, but then also Islam in itself. And if you go back to, again, Islamic history, there have been expeditions where Muhammad has been riling up his followers to go and conquer new territories and, capture blonde-haired women.
It's not only that the West has imported men from cultures that actively degrade women, particularly non-Muslim ones. At the same time, the force-feeding of a new moral narrative has also taken hold, making it almost impossible for anybody to speak out on this issue. For decades, schools, universities, the mainstream media, and much of the public sector have been pushing ideas such as white privilege, white fragility, and anti-racism. We're told that while white people cannot experience racism, they themselves inherently riddled with a phantom hateful prejudice towards others. And it's often women who are drawn to such toxic woke doctrines. Statistics show that particularly university-educated women have become increasingly radically left-leaning as they champion refugees, mass migration, and a brand of feminism that teaches them that it is their country and culture, the West, that has an oppressive patriarchy. How at risk do you think young girls are in today's society? Because I always think we've got a toxic combination here of not just increased threat levels from physical crime, sexual crime. We know, for instance, the majority of phone muggings or attempted muggings are now happening against lone women. These are easier targets. But of course, when it comes to harassment and sexual crime, the victims are almost entirely female. But at the same time, it is, in my experienced young girls who are most keen to adopt concepts such as unconscious bias and white privilege. And then at the same time, women are also being told to live in a very sexualized way, and that is empowerment. And I wonder how sustainable that is as a social cocktail.
Yeah, well, it certainly seems to be the biggest group of people just swallowing the whole woke textbook are sort of young liberal-leaning women, which is quite ironic because in respect of what we're talking about today, they are the prime victims. And I think they're almost being disarmed from being sensibly skeptical out in public places. I was very interested, I think a couple of months ago, maybe 3 months ago, ITV News did a very good report on what it was like to be a woman out and about on the streets in the evening. I think they focused on Cardiff and Nottingham and the male harassing behaviour. And, you know, if you watched it, it didn't seem to occur to them, literally, that almost every single abusive, creepy, harassing male was from an ethnic minority background.
More often than not, it seems to me the people who are most keen on pushing the narrative about integration, about not being Islamophobic, about things being racist, tends to be the white middle class women. And I wonder if you think that they really understand what a lot of Muslim men might think about them.
I honestly think that if they did, they would take a much more different position on this because, I think, again, when we normalize the kind of, I like to call it Islam light, or the view that we're just fed, in the sense that, you know, even Western liberal feminists are very much guilty of this and thinking that Islam is just another culture that we need to respect, or that, you know, they have a different set of values, but in no way does it infringe on, you know, actual women's rights. To call it Islamophobic, I would say you are supposed to be fearful of something like that. And I just don't think that with the level of dawah that's been happening in the UK, and with the level of kind of this push of Islam being a religion of peace, a lot of, as you said, Western or English middle class women have taken that up as their fight to kind of promote that Islam is a religion of peace and it's extremely tolerant and they just have their own way of doing things. And if their women want to cover up, then so be it. But if you peel back the layers, many of those women or girls within those families are subjected to so much behind the scene. And I mean, coming from a Muslim family myself, like I said, I was one of the lucky ones, but I understand the level of coercion that goes on behind closed doors. And I don't think a lot of the women here are willing to accept that for what it is.
There's a naivety in Western women, sometimes I find liberal Western women, that getting on with people, not just men, not just in relationship, in friendships as well, with like other women or other men, whatever it might be, of different cultures, that they think this is general to all liberalism, I think, so that everyone else is the same, that all cultures have the same value, that all cultures value relationships, different kinds of relationships, and men and women in the same way, the men's rights and women's rights in the same way. They think it's sort of like a Disney World or something, right? But the reality is very different. So there is that naivety, which in cases of Muslim men, conservative Islamist Muslim men, become very dangerous.
In 2015, German Chancellor Angela Merkel allowed over 1 million asylum seekers, mostly men, to cross the border into Germany. Well, that year ended with the mass sexual assault of women in Cologne on New Year's Eve. The authorities reported that the perpetrators were almost exclusively from an immigrant background and of mainly Arab and North African origin. For many, this shocking incident was a wake-up call. Covered up for days by the European media, Cologne also highlighted the extent to which politicians were willing to downplay and minimize harms being done to women in order to defend mass migration.
There is violence against women and girls that you are describing. A very similar situation to what happened in Cologne could be described on Broad Street in Birmingham every week, where women are baited and heckled.
Time and again, the political class have done everything within their power to gaslight the public over this issue, while demonising those that do raise concerns.
Grooming gangs that I would call rape gangs. Tell me about them. How many of those have we got? Not country lines, those particular groups.
To avoid any misunderstanding, can she define what she means by that? What does she mean by that?
You know full well what I mean by that. It's all over the television. You know exactly what I mean by that.
To enable me to give a full answer, can she be clear what she means by that? I'm not clear what she means.
How much clearer do you want me to be?
I'm not sure why she's so nervous to say what she means. What do you mean?
No. I am saying exactly what I mean.
I'm unclear, Chair, what is meant by the question. If she could spell it out, I can answer.
Whether the time it took for key details to be made public about the Southport murderer, or the confected outrage at even identifying the existence of Pakistani rape gangs, or refusing to collect, collate, or publicise any data on nationality and crime statistics, why is the establishment not only so muscular in censoring discussion, but continues to willfully enable ongoing mass migration and community segregation? Why do so many politicians, police, the media, and those within the legal system not only ignore the suffering of women and girls, but become actively complicit in covering it up, going as far as creating a fictional and dangerous far right, and even imprisoning people for supposedly being part of it? Why are they so hell-bent on being part of extreme cultural vandalism against their own nation and the fascistic censorship of its people? Well, I'm beginning to think we are now merely in damage control. During the Hare Hills riots, a woman was arrested as she watched her community burn. She was arrested for complaining about the effects of immigration on the town she grew up in.
What are they doing? What are they doing? Is that not racially offensive? What they're doing is not racially offensive.
Then there was the incident of the woman who turned to the police after being spat on. She wasn't helped by them. Instead, she was apprehended because she used the words filthy migrant to describe the perpetrator.
So you have a problem with my words?
Yes.
Because a filthy migrant just spat on me?
Yeah, that is...
And you've got the issue with me?
We have a duty to challenge that language, yeah.
And in Denmark, there was the shocking story of a 17-year-old girl who used pepper spray to fight off a rapist near a migrant centre. She was prosecuted for carrying the weapon. The message is clear. There is no problem. And if you dare think there is, then you are the problem. It is so dangerous. Yeah, do you think that in part huge swathes of the media are complicit in the cover-up? I mean, one thing that I've noticed is very often when there is the report of a particular crime, the suspect isn't described or named. I think, for example, of the chemical attack carried out by Abdullah Zaidi, you had the police saying a man is on the loose. The likelihood is he's sustained injuries himself on his face as a result of this chemical attack. And yet they gave no description. And so you thought straight away, okay, we know what's going on here.
Yes, and people will also say that the perpetrator, even if it reaches court, will be described according to the town he's living in. So you'll get like a Swansea man who battered people with a hammer in central London, and it turns out to be someone who's not originally from Swansea. So again, there's a huge level of discomfort about actually being open about the origins of perpetrators from ethnic minority groups.
We treat people differently based on their ethnicity or based on their religion. So if man A has perpetrated a crime and he happens to, have the last name Smith or Jones and he's got blonde hair and blue eyes, and man B has the same crime, but maybe he's got darker skin and his name is Ahmed or Ali, then they're going to be treated differently. People are going to be afraid of the term Islamophobia, bigotry, racism, whatever. And so they're going to be treating that second man differently. And that is what empowers them.
But I think something else that really winds people up is you have the public information campaigns from the Home Office, from the Mayor of London's office, where they're trying to sort of nudge young males into more respectful behaviour. And in every single one of those films, I think there's been about 4 so far, it's always depicted as the white English male who does the harassing and the ethnic minority young men who restrain him and, oh mate, stop doing that. And there is increasing evidence, anecdotal and some statistical, to suggest that's the precise opposite of the truth.
Nah, she ghosted me. Dumb bitch. Probably wouldn't know a good thing if it slapped her in the face. Someone I'd gladly do if I see her again.
So the government are paying lip service in the sense that they're saying violence against women and girls is going to be treated on the same level as terrorism. It's like a national emergency. And I completely agree with that. But then if we've got all these organizations and grassroots charities and NGOs who refuse to accept that Islam is actually one of the leading causes of at least a prevailing mindset of why assimilation or integration or women and girls are not protected in the right way, then this is something that we actually have to tackle beyond lip service. So we need to look at what's being said in our mosques, what are the sermons that are being said in Arabic as well. And some of these wider central London mosques have sermons in Arabic. That's ridiculous. And like France and other countries have now kind of woken up to the fact that Italy as well, that everything needs to be in English. So everyone's aware of the kind of message they're putting out to, especially like second and third generation British immigrants, children of immigrants who we'd expect to have kind of become more British at this point. But instead we see a regression.
Despite the increasingly extreme and heavy-handed government's response, the House of Cards is beginning to fall. More and more ordinary people are beginning to feel unshackled in talking about mass immigration. The problem is, however, that despite the dam bursting on acknowledging the major inherent problems this country now faces, nobody is yet putting forward actual political solutions to tackle it. Discourse, inquiries and debate can only get us so far. Until we have leaders with the tenacity to propose solutions, the rate of demographic change means that far from changing the dynamics of a divided society, matters are likely to get much, much worse. It's my belief that this is why the cover-ups continue. When a society no longer protects its women and girls, it fails to function as a society at all. It is vital that the UK government releases statistics in full, as other European countries have done, showing sexual assault, rapes and gang rapes broken down by nationality, asylum status and ethnicity. The cover-up must end.